This morning, the Middle East woke up at war. For the first time in history, the United States and Israel launched a declared, coordinated military attack against Iranian territory. Not a threat, not a warning. A confirmed, ongoing military operation, named by the Pentagon itself, Operation Epic Fury. Trump went on camera. Netanyahu went on camera. Iran's Revolutionary Guard went on camera. And the entire world is now watching what may be the most consequential military decision since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. With consequences no one can fully predict. The question is no longer whether Iran will respond. Iran is already responding. The real question is how far this goes and who gets pulled in next. Let's separate what is confirmed from what is still unclear. Confirmed by multiple independent sources, including Reuters, the Associated Press, BBC, CNN, CBS News, and NBC News, Israel fired first. The Israeli Ministry of Defense announced a preemptive strike against Iran in the early hours of Saturday, February 28th. Minutes later, President Trump posted a video on Truth Social, confirming that American forces had begun, and these are his exact words, major combat operations in Iran. The Pentagon officially named the operation Operation Epic Fury. Explosions were confirmed across at least 6 Iranian cities: Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, Kermanshah, and Tabriz. The port of Karg Island, which handles a significant share of Iran's oil exports, was also reported hit. Smoke was photographed and filmed rising near the compound of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in downtown Tehran. Reuters confirmed Iran's airspace was immediately closed. Multiple Gulf nations, Bahrain, the UAE, Kuwait, and Qatar, also closed their airspace. In retaliation, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced the launch of what it called a first wave of missiles and drones. The IRGC confirmed strikes against 4 U.S. military installations: Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, Al Salam Air Base in Kuwait, Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE, and the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Smoke was reported rising from the Bahrain base. What is not yet confirmed, whether Khamenei or Iranian President Pezeshkian were successfully targeted. Iran's state agency IRNA says Pezeshkian is alive. Khamenei's location is unknown. Multiple sources report he was moved to a secure location before the strikes began. Also unconfirmed, the full extent of damage to Iran's nuclear facilities and casualty numbers on either side. That is the factual picture as of this hour. To understand what happened today, you need to understand what built up to it. 3 threads converged over the past several weeks. First, the nuclear program. Washington and Tehran were actively negotiating. 2 days before this attack, U.S. and Iranian representatives met in Geneva, Switzerland. Both sides described those talks as productive. Technical teams were preparing to meet again in Vienna the following week. That diplomatic track was still open when the first bombs fell. Second, notice the military buildup. For months, the U.S. had been repositioning an enormous strike force across the region. Multiple aircraft carrier groups, dozens of warships, hundreds of combat aircraft. The USS Abraham Lincoln was already operating in the Arabian Sea. The USS Gerald Ford arrived near Israel's coast in the days before the attack. In hindsight, this was not pressure diplomacy. This was preparation. Third, Trump's public posture. On Friday, the day before the attack, Trump stated publicly he was not happy with Iran's negotiating position. On Saturday morning, the strikes began. Now, the strategic targets themselves. Tehran is Iran's political and military command center. Isfahan is the location of Iran's primary uranium enrichment infrastructure. Qom is the ideological and spiritual nerve center of the Islamic Republic. Karg Island and Bushehr represent Iran's energy export capacity. Take those out, and you are targeting the regime's revenue, not just its weapons. This was not a message. This was an attempt at structural dismantlement. Here is where precision matters most. Because the language being used tells us exactly how far the ambitions go. Trump did not say, "We are targeting nuclear sites." He said, "We're going to destroy their missiles and raze their missile industry to the ground. We're going to annihilate their navy. We will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon." And then he said something that goes far beyond any military objective. He addressed the Iranian people directly. "When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations." That is not the language of a strike. That is the language of regime change. Netanyahu echoed it, calling the operation preventive and stating that it would create the conditions for the brave Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. So, what we are witnessing is a military operation with three simultaneous objectives: destroy Iran's military capacity, remove its leadership, and trigger a domestic political collapse from within. Whether all three can be achieved, that is the central uncertainty of this moment. Let's map what comes next. 3 scenarios, ranked by probability. High probability. Regional escalation, limited in duration. Iran retaliates with force against Israeli and American targets across the Gulf. Both sides absorb significant damage, but stop short of crossing absolute red lines. Chemical weapons, direct strikes on civilian capitals of neutral nations, or nuclear threats. The operation lasts between 5 and 15 days. The U.S. and Israel declare specific objectives achieved. Iran declares a moral victory and vows long-term resistance. The region is permanently destabilized, but open conventional warfare pauses. Medium probability. Internal crisis inside Iran. If Khamenei is confirmed dead or incapacitated, the Islamic Republic enters uncharted territory. The IRGC, which has functioned both as an army and as an economic empire, may fragment along factional lines. Opposition movements, suppressed violently for years, attempt to organize. This is the scenario Trump is explicitly betting on. The difficulty is that the same regime that killed tens of thousands of its own citizens in recent months did so precisely because it has retained the tools to crush internal dissent. That capacity does not disappear overnight. Medium probability. Closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's most powerful non-nuclear leverage is geography. 20% of the world's oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz. A closure, even temporary, would trigger immediate energy price shocks globally, force China and European powers into active diplomatic intervention, and dramatically raise the economic cost of this conflict for the United States and its allies. Iran has threatened this before and never acted on it. Today's circumstances are different. Low probability. Direct military involvement of Russia or China. Neither Moscow nor Beijing is positioned to benefit from direct military confrontation with the United States. What is far more likely is intelligence sharing, accelerated weapons supply, and coordinated diplomatic obstruction at the United Nations Security Council. Expect those, not troops. This is the part that requires the most precision, because this is where narrative fills the space that facts have not yet covered. On the question of timing and intent. The attack came 48 hours after a diplomatic meeting in Geneva that both sides publicly called productive. On the surface, that looks contradictory. But the surface is not the full story. The Israeli Defense Ministry confirmed the strike date was set weeks ago, after months of joint planning. That means the Geneva meeting happened with the military countdown already running. Whether it was a genuine last attempt at diplomacy or a carefully staged finale to a decision already made, cannot be confirmed from open sources. Both interpretations exist. Both deserve to be stated. What also deserves to be stated is what Iran brought to that table, or failed to bring. Tehran has a documented history of using negotiations as a delay mechanism while continuing to advance its nuclear program beneath the surface. That is not an opinion. It is the documented finding of multiple international inspection reports over the past 2 decades. Whether that pattern was repeating itself in Geneva is disputed, but the pattern itself is real. There is one more piece of context that cannot be omitted. In January of this year, Iran's own government killed between 6,000 and 36,000 of its own citizens. The wide range reflecting the near-total internet shutdown the regime imposed to restrict the flow of information. The figures come from the human rights activists' news agency, Iran International, and a Time magazine report citing hospital death registries. The Iranian government's own confirmed figure is over 3,000. Even that number represents a massacre. These were people who went into the streets to protest their government. They were shot. A journalist does not take sides on what that means for international law or for the moral calculations of foreign governments. That is for the audience to weigh. But a journalist does not omit it either. It is documented. It happened. And it is part of the landscape that anyone trying to understand this conflict must hold in full view. On Trump's intelligence gap, CNN reported on Friday that Trump claimed Iran was building missiles capable of reaching the United States, a claim that is not supported by current U.S. intelligence assessments, according to multiple sources. The gap between a stated justification and the underlying intelligence is always significant. It does not tell us the decision was wrong. It tells us the public rationale may not be the complete rationale. On the absence of the United Kingdom, Britain was not consulted. Britain did not participate. For America's closest military ally to be excluded from a major combat operation without advance notice is diplomatically unusual. The coalition here is bilateral. That matters. On Iran's proxy network, the IRGC's first wave has been launched. But Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi forces in Yemen, the militia networks across Iraq and Syria, none of them have yet moved at full capacity. When and whether they do will determine whether this remains a contained U.S.-Israel-Iran confrontation or becomes a regional war with no clear borders. What is happening today is not another exchange of strikes between regional adversaries. The United States, the world's largest military power, has declared and confirmed open combat operations against the Iranian state. That is a threshold that has not been crossed before. The next 72 hours will tell us a great deal. Whether Khamenei survived, whether Iran's retaliatory capacity is greater than anticipated, whether the Strait of Hormuz becomes a weapon, whether the Iranian population moves or stays home, afraid. Trump is betting he can destroy a military apparatus and destabilize a 47-year-old theocracy in a matter of days. Netanyahu is betting the same. They may be right. Regimes have collapsed under this kind of pressure before. But history has a way of punishing certainty in this part of the world, and I will leave you with the question that no government, no analyst, and no intelligence agency has fully answered yet. If Operation Epic Fury ends, and the Islamic Republic is still standing, what comes next? And who pays that price? What? Breaking news! Trump announces. Ali Khamenei is officially dead.